I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there. It must have been so difficult for her, being a solitary woman. There weren't women prime ministers or women presidents. She was the only one, so I think she carved her own role.
In a moment no one expected but everyone knew was long overdue, King Charles stepped into the spotlight, not as a monarch, but as a father carrying the weight of a decades-old silence. After a betrayal from Queen Camilla sent shockwaves through the royal family, the king publicly addressed the pain he had once refused to name. For the first time, he spoke directly to Diana's sons, apologizing, acknowledging, and revealing truths that had long been buried beneath royal protocol. What caused this royal reckoning? What did Camilla do? And why now? Stay with us as we uncover the betrayal that shook the throne. A tense history between two worlds. The union between King Charles and Queen Camilla was meant to represent closure, an elegant if complicated chapter in the royal family's evolving story. For years, they maintained the illusion of stability. Polished appearances, rehearsed smiles, and curated interviews painted a picture of harmony. But beneath the surface, two histories lived side by side. One belonged to Camilla, the woman Charles had loved long before Diana. The other belonged to Diana herself, gone, but never forgotten. And at the center of this quiet storm were her sons, William and Harry, still carrying the scars of a mother lost and a legacy altered. A fragile balance had to be maintained from the day Camilla entered official royal life. Public forgiveness was never guaranteed. The late Queen's carefully worded approval paved the way, but Diana's shadow remained in every room Camilla entered. William, ever the diplomat, kept his distance. Harry, more emotional and outspoken, made his distrust clear. Yet both, for the sake of peace, learned how to navigate the complex family dynamics without making waves. They tolerated the presence of the woman once at the center of their parents' pain. But tolerance is not trust. Behind palace walls, the tension simmered. Charles, now king, did what monarchs do. He compartmentalized. He focused on duty, on legacy, on unifying a commonwealth that still mourned Queen Elizabeth. But he also knew the distance between his sons and Camilla would never fully close. William maintained politeness. Even after stepping back from royal life, Harry made it clear in interviews and memoirs that he felt unresolved. And while the press eventually softened its treatment of Camilla, Diana's name remained sacred in the hearts of millions. The public hadn't forgotten. Camilla, for her part, worked hard to maintain a public image of calm royalty. She championed literacy, supported Charles's initiatives, and avoided emotionally sensitive topics. Yet within the family, old wounds never healed, only covered. The palace always assumed that as time moved on, those wounds would fade, but that was wishful thinking. Grief has memory, and memory never forgets betrayal. Against this fragile backdrop, a single act, one deeply personal and quietly cruel, would break the balance completely. An act by Camilla that wasn't meant to be public, that was never supposed to reach the ears of William and Harry, but it did. And when it did, it reopened a chapter that had never truly closed. What followed was not just a royal scandal, it was a family reckoning. Because this time, silence wasn't enough. This time, the sons of Diana would not swallow the offense for the sake of unity. And this time, King Charles could no longer hide behind protocol or public expectation. The subsequent betrayal would force the king to confront his past and push him toward the one thing he had always avoided, a public apology to the very sons who had waited a lifetime to hear the truth. The betrayal that couldn't stay hidden. It started with a private gathering, one of those quiet, off-the-record royal receptions at Clarence House where only trusted guests are invited. There were no cameras, no press, just a carefully curated list of aristocrats, old family friends, and key donors. The kind of event where wine flows freely, conversations turn informal, and reputations are guarded with casual grace. But that evening, one careless comment from Queen Camilla would spark a firestorm the crown never saw coming. Sources say Camilla was in high spirits, laughing among old companions, when the topic inevitably turned to Princess Diana. What followed was not a direct insult, not a headline-grabbing attack, but something worse. a cruelly dismissive remark, laced with sarcasm and contempt. "Well, we all know she wasn't exactly stable, was she?" she reportedly said, in that trademark tone of cold amusement. The room fell quiet. Those who heard it directly exchanged uneasy glances, and a few discreetly excused themselves. It wasn't the first time Camilla had made private remarks about the late princess, but this one felt different. It wasn't just tone, it was timing, it was personal, and it would not stay buried. Within 48 hours, whispers reached Kensington Palace, not from the press, but from someone present that evening who had grown tired of protecting Camilla's image. The words were passed carefully, respectfully, until they landed before Prince William. He read them once, then again, then handed the transcript to an aide without saying a word. That night, Catherine described him as distant but tightly coiled. He didn't need confirmation. He believed it, because this wasn't the first time Camilla had crossed that line. It was simply the first time someone had written it down. Harry found out days later through an entirely different channel, one of his sources in London, who knew exactly how fast these things moved through the corridors of power. When he called William, the brothers spoke calmly, but were perfectly aligned for the first time in a long while. "She crossed a line," Harry said, "and this time she doesn't get to walk away from it." What made this betrayal hit so hard wasn't just the comment. It was the years of careful public repositioning. The palace has made countless efforts to reframe Camilla as a respectable queen consort. The interviews, the documentaries, the soft-focus photography. And now, after all that work to repair the public image, it took one sentence to destroy the illusion and reopen Diana's wounds in the hearts of her sons. The leak, of course, reached the press eventually, an unnamed source, a private remark. But the public didn't need confirmation. The outrage was immediate. Headlines across the globe asked the same question. Has Queen Camilla finally gone too far? Inside Buckingham Palace, the walls were closing in, and for King Charles there would be no more hiding. The betrayal was exposed, the pressure was rising, and now the world waited for what he would do next. William and Harry's united fury. In recent years, the distance between William and Harry had become a matter of global fascination. Once inseparable, their relationship had been strained by family rifts, press wars, and painful interviews. But when Camilla's cruel remark about Diana surfaced, something shifted. The brothers, for all their differences, were still her sons, and in that moment, the pain of losing her, the injustice of it, brought them together like nothing else could. William's reaction was quiet but piercing. He didn't shout, he didn't storm through palace halls, but his silence was louder than any outburst. Staff described him as sharp, controlled, and deeply disappointed. It wasn't just the comment that angered him, but the betrayal from within. For years, he had walked the tightrope of diplomacy, giving Camilla polite space, smiling for the cameras, protecting the monarchy's unity. But this was different. This was an insult to his mother's memory, spoken casually, as if her life hadn't been one of sacrifice and sorrow, as if she hadn't endured enough. Harry, on the other hand, was fire. When his team in California confirmed the quote was real, he was furious. Meghan reportedly found him pacing the kitchen late into the night, muttering under his breath, unable to sleep. While he had never held back his disdain for Camilla, this reopened wounds that had never fully healed. The woman who had, in his words, played a role in his mother's pain had now mocked her legacy, and for Harry, that was unforgivable. The call he made to William that week was short but charged. "She thinks we won't say anything, so we'll let it slide. We can't." And for the first time in years, William didn't push back. "No," he replied, "we won't." The next few days saw a flurry of private calls. William, in London, Harry, in Montecito. Aides spoke in hushed tones. Emails were exchanged, meetings scheduled, and conditions reviewed. And while no formal reunion occurred, the brothers clarified to palace officials that this would not be buried. There would be no quiet forgiveness, no brushing it aside. Either the monarchy addressed it, or they would. Their message reached King Charles quickly. The monarch, already reeling from public backlash, faced an even more painful dilemma. His sons, divided on so many issues, had united over one. And that one thing was Diana, the woman he had once loved, once lost, and had never fully spoken about with the sons she left behind. The royal court had weathered many scandals, but this wasn't about politics or public image. It was about grief, about dignity, about a father being asked to choose between defending his wife and honoring his late first love for the sake of his children. And while Charles had long believed time could heal all wounds, he was about to discover that silence only deepens them, because William and Harry weren't just grieving sons anymore. They were men demanding justice for the mother whose voice had been mocked and whose absence still ruled their hearts. Charles's private shame. No crown could shield him from this, no title, diplomatic phrasing, or royal aid whispering, "Stay the course." When King Charles read the private transcript of what Camilla had said about Diana and saw the response from his sons, something cracked beneath the surface. It was the one fracture he could no longer conceal. Behind the grand rooms and centuries-old tapestries, he sat alone in his private study, staring at the words Camilla had spoken. They were sharp, careless, and they pierced deeper than he had expected, not just because of the public backlash, but because the boys, his boys, had turned their backs in unison. He had been here before, in the quiet, with regret. In the years since Diana's demise, Charles had learned to live with a strange duality, public duty and private guilt. He had built a new life with Camilla. He had worked tirelessly to redefine her image, to integrate her into a monarchy she was never meant to be part of. And for a time it worked. The public softened. The press stopped using the word mistress. Even William and Harry in their ways had made room for her. But none of it erased the past. It only buried it deeper. And now, with one sentence, that past had clawed its way back into the throne room. He didn't speak to Camilla that night. He couldn't. The shame wasn't just about what she said, but about what he didn't prevent. How could he defend her when he knew that Diana's memory still lived loudly in his sons' hearts? He poured a drink. He stared at the fireplace. And for the first time in years, Charles felt like a man with no answers, just a father who had failed to protect the bridge between his present and the woman who helped shape his future. In the following days, his public appearances were brief, his expressions subdued. Courtiers noticed the change. His usual poise was replaced with hesitations, pauses, and glances toward the floor. When advisors suggested releasing a brief palace statement clarifying Camilla's words, Charles shook his head. "A statement won't fix this," he said. "It needs to come from me." It wasn't a political calculation. It was paternal responsibility. Privately, he drafted a letter. Not for the press, not for public relations. For William, another for Harry. 2 separate pages, handwritten, not typed. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't try to explain Camilla's words away. He simply acknowledged the pain and should never have been theirs alone. It wasn't the act of a king. It was the act of a father haunted by what he couldn't undo. He knew the apology couldn't bring Diana back, but it could stop her memory from being erased. And it could begin, however late, to mend the hearts of the 2 boys who had waited their whole lives to hear him finally say it. Behind closed doors. A royal confrontation. The meeting wasn't on the public calendar. No press vans, ceremonial motorcades, or formal photographers were waiting outside Clarence house. Just a closed-door conversation that would change the tone of a monarchy already teetering on the emotional edge. Prince William arrived first, stone-faced, silent, carrying a weight that had been building for years. Not just because of Camilla's remark, but because of everything left unsaid between father and son. Having flown in under the radar days earlier, Harry was already inside. The 2 brothers didn't exchange many words before the king entered. They didn't need to. They were aligned now, and that spoke louder than conversation. King Charles walked into the room not as the sovereign, but as a father. No crown, no medals, just a man who knew he had reached the edge of what silence could protect. For a few seconds, no one spoke. William looked down at the floor. Harry leaned against the fireplace mantel, arms crossed. Charles broke the silence. "I read what she said," he began, "and I won't defend it." Harry exhaled through his nose, almost scoffing. "That's a first." William didn't react, but his eyes remained locked on his father. "You may not defend it," he said calmly, "but you allowed it. And you knew how we felt." The room thickened with memory. Years of politeness, years of letting things go, of swallowing pain in the name of duty. Harry stepped forward now, voice sharper. "You spent more energy rehabilitating her image than protecting ours. And now she talks about our mother like that." Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He sat slowly in the chair by the window and said, "You're right." The words stunned them both. I should have stopped it long ago, Charles continued. Not just the comment, all of it, the pretending, the avoidance. I thought time would make it easier for you, but I forgot how long grief holds on. For a moment, William's face softened. You forgot how loudly she still lives with us, he said. She's not just a memory, she's a voice. And that voice was mocked. Harry added more quietly now, you didn't just fail us, you failed her. Again. Those words hit hard. Charles closed his eyes and nodded. I know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the handwritten letters he'd drafted privately. I can't undo the past, but I can stop letting it define us. He handed the letters to his sons. Read them when you're ready. I didn't write them as your king. I wrote them as your father. The room fell into a heavy silence once more, but it wasn't the silence of anger, but the silence that comes after something has cracked open. They didn't hug. There were no tears. But something had shifted when William finally stood and looked his father in the eye. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that hadn't existed in a long time: honesty. The palace statement that made history. When the palace press office was summoned to Buckingham just after dawn, they knew something serious had changed. Statements were nothing new. Words were the palace's most powerful armor. But this differed. The king had made it clear, no spin, deflection, or buffering language crafted to please every side. He wanted the truth. And for the first time in royal memory, a reigning monarch was about to publicly apologize to his sons for pain rooted not in politics, but in family, deep, personal, and raw. The team gathered in the Queen's drawing room, where King Charles sat with two pieces of paper. One was his original draft, handwritten and emotional. The second was a revised version, refined just enough for public delivery, but without losing the heart of it. He reviewed every word again, not as a monarch, but as a man reckoning with decades of silence. Then, with a quiet nod, he gave his approval. The palace staff stood in stunned silence, not because it was controversial, but because it was unprecedented. At precisely 5 p.m. London time, the royal family's official social channels released the statement to the world. The royal seal, the king's signature, and a headline that froze the internet. His Majesty issues personal apology to Princes William and Harry. In the statement, Charles wrote, "As a father, I recognize that silence can sometimes cause more harm than truth. I regret not speaking sooner about the pain my sons carried after the loss of their beloved mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. Recent remarks that caused distress were deeply inappropriate and do not reflect the values of this family or the love we hold for her memory. To William and Harry, I am sorry. I have failed in protecting the peace that should have always surrounded your mother's legacy. Let it be known, her name remains sacred, and your grief will never again be ignored." The public's response was instant and intense. News anchors paused mid-broadcast. Social media exploded with reactions, some in disbelief, many in tears. For a generation raised on the tragedy of Diana, it was a long-awaited moment of justice. Thousands gathered outside Kensington Palace that evening, laying fresh flowers, not in mourning, but in recognition. The apology was not perfect. It did not erase the past, but it was real, and that, for many, mattered more than anything. Inside palace corridors, reactions were more mixed. Some feared it would further divide the family. Others, especially younger staff, called it the most human act the monarchy had shown in decades. And in the private residences of two very different princes, a quiet shift had occurred. Not complete reconciliation, but something close. The acknowledgement that their pain had finally been seen. The monarchy had spoken, and this time it had said something that sounded like the truth. Camilla's silence and isolation. The day the statement was released, Queen Camilla was nowhere to be seen. No public appearances, no press photos, not even a fleeting wave from a car window. Her sudden absence was glaring for someone who had worked so hard to be accepted by the public. The silence around her inside palace walls wasn't just physical, but strategic. No one knew what to say, not even those who had once championed her transformation from outsider to consort. Camilla had always walked a careful line. Her image had been delicately rebuilt over 2 decades with tightly managed interviews, carefully selected charities, and a tone of quiet dignity. She never pretended to be Diana's replacement. She couldn't, but she had been accepted, if not adored. But acceptance has limits, especially in the face of betrayal, and this time, she had crossed the line that the monarchy's public relations machine couldn't repair. The atmosphere in Clarence's house shifted overnight. Her senior staff avoided direct conversation. Scheduled appearances were quietly postponed. Even King Charles, though still loyal to his wife in public, kept his interactions measured behind closed doors. The emotional distance between them grew wider, especially after the statement. Camilla had read the apology 3 times in private before setting the printout down with trembling hands. "So it's her again," she whispered to no one in particular. "Always her." That whisper, however, spoke volumes. Camilla never addressed the comment she made at the private event. Not to William, not to Harry, not even to Charles. Her silence, some said, was out of shame. Others believed it was pride. But those closest to her knew better. It was fear, not of losing her title or position, but of becoming what she had always feared, the villain in a story already written in Diana's ink. She stopped dining in the main quarters for several days. Meals were taken privately. Aides noticed she no longer asked for briefings or press updates. She avoided the wing of the palace where family discussions were being held. Her dogs, usually energetic and at her heels, seemed to pick up on the tension. For the first time in years, Camilla felt unwelcome in a home she had worked so hard to claim. The public's reaction didn't help. Online forums, once cautiously supportive of her, now overflowed with anger. Newspapers questioned her future in the firm. Calls for a formal response were met with silence. The woman who had once been called the most hated woman in Britain now faced a renewed wave of resentment that no royal title could cushion. And perhaps most painfully, the tension between her and Charles was no longer invisible. They sat together at events, but the space between them was palpable. No touches, no whispers, just the quiet presence of a crown weighed down by conflict. In that isolation, Camilla began to understand what Diana must have felt. Only this time, the walls weren't closing in on her because she was unloved. They were closing in because, finally, everyone saw what had always been there. Public forgiveness or just more pain. Forgiveness in the public eye is a complicated thing. It doesn't come with a royal seal or a formal statement. It simmers in whispers, newspaper columns, and family dinners where no one speaks first. After King Charles's apology was broadcast worldwide, Britain held its breath. For many, it was a moment of relief. Finally, a monarch had acknowledged Diana not just as a tragic figure, but as a mother whose absence had shaped the lives of 2 princes. Yet for others, the apology was too little, too late. The wound had festered too long. Outside Kensington Palace, the public gathered again, not in mourning, but in something quieter. Reflection. Diana's image, framed in candlelight, looked down over handwritten notes that read, "She was never crazy. She was never unstable. She was right." An entire generation, raised on tabloid chaos and whispered palace drama, now saw the truth confirmed by the institution that once buried it. The apology wasn't just for William and Harry. It was for everyone who had watched Diana be silenced, who had felt her heartbreak echo through every headline. Public reaction was divided. The king's courage moved some. "It takes strength to admit wrong in front of the world," one woman told reporters outside Windsor. "It won't bring Diana back, but bring her justice." Others were more skeptical. "Apologies mean nothing when the damage is done," another said. "He protected Camilla for decades. He let her image be rebuilt while Diana's was picked apart." And then there were those watching more closely, watching the brothers. William did not release a personal statement. He didn't need to. His presence alongside his father in a quiet charity event days later, standing with measured dignity, said enough. Harry, back in California, also remained silent in public, but Meghan was seen wearing a bracelet once gifted by Diana, perhaps a quiet nod to solidarity and memory. The world didn't need their words. Their silence was filled with meaning. The question quickly turned among royal commentators. Was this the beginning of healing or another chapter of damage control? Could the monarchy survive another fracture like this? Was Camilla still safe in her position as queen consort, or would whispers of abdication follow? Palace sources denied any such talks, but the mood had changed. The walls were thinner, the air was tighter. For Charles, the days following the apology were solemn. He met with veterans, visited schools, arms, waved from palace balconies, but he did it all with eyes that looked just a little heavier, not from age, but from the weight of memory. He had apologized, yes, but would that apology mend what had been broken between his sons? Would the world forgive the silence that allowed a legacy to be bruised? Forgiveness may come, or it may not. But one thing was clear. Once frozen in tradition, the monarchy had finally flinched, and it was the name of a woman long gone, and the pain of her sons, that forced it to do so. What this means for the future of the monarchy. The monarchy has thrived on control, image, narrative, and silence. But after King Charles's public apology, that control cracked. What followed wasn't chaos, but something far more dangerous to the firm's old ways: vulnerability. For the first time, the royal family allowed the world to see its wounds, and more importantly, who caused them. It was a historic shift, one that will forever change how the monarchy moves forward, especially under the eyes of a new generation that demands more than rehearsed smiles and sealed archives. Within Buckingham Palace, quiet conversations began to stir about the long-term future of Queen Camilla's role. Though no official statement suggested any change in her status, the tone had shifted. Public trust had weakened. Royal analysts noted that Camilla had been noticeably absent from several engagements that followed the apology, and while aides chalked it up to rest, insiders knew it was something more profound. She was no longer the quiet stabilizer beside Charles. She had become the storm, and storms, even royal ones, do not last forever. Meanwhile, Prince William's role as future king became even more defined. Those who once saw him as a figure bound by tradition now viewed him as someone capable of holding even his father accountable. The way he carried himself in the aftermath, measured, protective of his mother's legacy, unshaken, positioned him not just as a royal, but as a man the public could trust. Trust, in a family that has long depended on performance, is the new currency of the crown. Prince Harry's position remains complex. Though separated by distance and choices, the apology drew him back into the conversation, not as a rebel, but as a son who had always sought truth. Whether or not his relationship with the institution heals, the moment proved one thing. Diana's sons, even when divided, are united by one truth: they will never allow her to be forgotten. For King Charles, the apology may be remembered as a moment of strength and surrender. He chose love over legacy, truth over image, and while it won't undo the past, it sends a message to future generations of royals. The crown is only as strong as the hearts that wear it. To reign is no longer just about endurance, it is about accountability. And so, the monarchy enters a new era where silence is no longer safe, where Diana's memory is no longer a ghost in the hallway but a voice in the room. What happens next will depend not on policies or parades, but on whether the royals have truly learned to listen to each other and the people. Because in the end, thrones may rise on tradition, but they survive on trust. And trust, once broken, is not inherited, it is earned. In the history of the crown, few moments have echoed louder than a father apologizing to his sons, not behind closed doors, but before the world. King Charles's words cannot rewrite the past, but they exposed what the monarchy has too long buried: grief, guilt, and truth. Diana's legacy was never erased. It lived on in the pain her sons carried. Now it lives in their strength. The betrayal may have come from within, but so did the reckoning. And the world will remember this not as a scandal, but as a shift. The monarchy bled, and this time it did not hide. What do you think about this story? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you.